Period. This time Constable plays the ball forward, looking for a run of Matt Green, runs to James Constable, Constable with a shooting Johnson. Oh! Constable has done it again! 20 minutes gone! James Constable's 26th goal of the season.
Welcome to this morning coffee break. What have you brewed yourself? I've got a cappuccino. Have you got yourself something?
I've got a latte here.
That is very fancy compared to mine. I reckon, is that got chocolate on top or anything special?
No. I try to steer clear of the chocolate, but it's probably full of sugar.
How are you doing in this pandemic at the minute?
Okay, yeah, just getting used to it really. Like obviously this new way that it's going to be now, and like I say, just trying to make sure we stay healthy and do what we're told. Really, just stay out of the way and stay at home, and just try and make our own little difference in any way we can.
Exactly. Have you got some space at home where you can keep yourself moving, keep yourself active?
Yeah, luckily, like I say, wife's obviously at home with the two kids, so it gives me a break if I need to go out and have a run or go and do some sort of fitness bike work and things like that. So, but to be fair, having the two kids and playing with them keeps me pretty fit. So I've got it sort of good, really, what I can be able to get out.
So early in your career, you started at Cirencester Town and progressed through their youth academy system, making several first-team appearances. And that was in 2002-2003. What's it like being a youth and going through these academy systems when you're seeing the competition you've got around you? How would you find it? As obviously at a young age, you've got all this pressure on you to do well. What was it like?
Obviously, from being in the academy, you're based with everybody sort of similar age and similar sort of abilities. Really play a lot of sort of good teams at that level, but sort of progressing then through from the academy into the first team, that was your first real taste of sort of men's football and sort of probably an eye-opener of what it was going to take to be able to play against these sort of guys and compete. Do
you remember your first few seconds going onto an adult football pitch? You've been called up to the first team, you're going on, what goes through you? Is adrenaline kicking? How's it go?
I think I was probably more nervous in the dressing room, like before, because I think we had played on the Saturday morning for the academy, and then obviously because we were at home, like it used to be the case that 3 or 4 lads that had done well or would then go up in the afternoon to sort of play with the first team. So they were short on numbers, so we had sort of 2 or 3 of us go up on the Saturday after our game. But I say it's probably more nerves sort of getting changed with everybody because we were 16, 17, 18. Like there was men all around us. But as soon as, like say, you get on the pitch and it was sort of more of a sort of you switch into sort of that mode of playing, and you're so focused on what you had to do, and obviously to get the call to come on was a bit of obviously nerves because you're sort of going into men's football. But in terms of as a player, I was desperately sort of excited and eager to get on there and show what I could do and hopefully, like I say, start my career.
Been at Cirencester. You then in December 2003, Chippenham Town, you signed for them in the Southern League. You have 19 appearances for them, 9 goals. So it's a great start at a new club. The main thing I want to ask you about is you scored the opening goal in the 1-1 draw against Worcester City in the FA Cup first round. Do you remember that goal?
Yeah, it was a bit of a scruffy. Like I think it hit like a few. Like I say,
it doesn't matter.
You claim it. Like I don't care who had a touch after that. I'm claiming it. Like obviously that was probably my first real experience of FA Cup, and I'd gone to Chippenham from Cirencester and sort of local rivalries, but I was desperate to kick on, and sort of I'd been playing bit parts at Cirencester, coming off the bench and playing in the reserves, but I didn't have a sort of a proper contract there. I was just coming and going as and when, but Chippenham obviously came in and offered me a 2-year deal, and it just seemed a little bit more structured.
Yeah, but that was my question. You touched it at the start, was your manager says, you've got an FA Cup game coming up. You're a striker. You know the history of the FA Cup. You know what for smaller clubs it means money-wise as well you can earn. You've gone in, you've got the opening goal. Was there that moment of, did it feel different to a league goal, is what I'm trying to get at? Was it?
Yeah, I think so. Like you say, you touched on, obviously, when you're a kid, you watch it and sort of you see the Gazzers against Arsenal and all that, those type of goals. Like they're sort of, you probably wouldn't score those goals in the league. It's sort of, there's so much more riding on it, and obviously as you get older and playing the competition more and more, you're more desperate to sort of do well in it and more desperate to get the big teams, especially say playing at Oxford and Kidderminster and the other clubs. You're not going to be facing your Man Uniteds and your Arsenals and Tottenhams week in, week out. Like, this is your opportunity to sort of play one of the big boys and enjoy it. So I think, like I say, it's more that sort of hoping you can do well, and like I say, you don't know when the next opportunity is going to come around that you can play in that competition.
Next, so you've had your time there. Next minute, we've got Football League clubs looking at you. We've got Bristol City, Swansea City, Swindon Town and Walsall. You ended up going to Walsall in the November 2005 on a loan, which then turned permanent. In your head, did you know all these clubs had gone for you?
Well, we had a midweek game. It was Merthyr Tydfil in the league, and I think we got to the ground as normal, not thinking sort of too much of it. And they were like, look, Walsall play Merthyr Tydfil in the FA Cup or something next weekend or whatever it was. And he was like, look, I think someone from Walsall's coming down. Like, they're going to come and sort of obviously look at Merthyr. Shop window, you're in the shop window now. This is your opportunity to show what you can do. And I think we were sort of, everyone was warming up. Sort of that was the sort of conversation. Look, scouts are going to be here, blah blah blah. But it wasn't, I think, till half time that we realised. They were like, look, Paul Mercer's actually here watching. He was the manager at the time, so I think everybody was just like, wow, like someone like that turning up at your ground to watch. Obviously, I know they were there watching the other team, but still, for you to be able to have people like that, players you watched as a kid, doing what they were doing and thinking, look, they're here watching. Like, I could do something really good and be sort of
definitely
moved up. And I think I scored a couple of goals that night, and I got a call the next day, and it was Darren, the manager at Chippenham at the time, and said, look, Paul Merson's interested, he wants you to go up and train. And I was just like, I think I just put the phone down. I was like, yeah, all right. I was thinking, he's like pulling my leg or whatever. Called back. He was like, no, I'm deadly serious. Like, he called me this morning. He's impressed. He wants you to go up there for a week and do a bit of training. He can have a look at you and see what he thinks and everything. And like I say, I was just blown away. Like 6 months earlier, I was sort of looking at over my shoulder and not being able to get in the team, and all of a sudden
Paul Merson
started the season really, really well. That season, scored, like I say, quite a few goals early on, and had been attracting a bit of attention locally in the press, but nothing to sort of that extent. And then obviously that happened, but as soon as that happened, it seemed overnight it just blew up. And Swansea and Bristol City, and I remember going to Walsall for a week, coming back, and then because I was still playing for Chippenham on the weekend, so I was up with these clubs all week training, coming back obviously playing for Chippenham, and then I went to Bristol City with Gary Johnson for a week. Yeah, the next week I went to Bristol City. And again, for me, it was just felt like a dream. I'd been doing what I've been doing, and all of a sudden I was training with sort of League One clubs and players and managers that I'd seen on TV, and all of a sudden I was like in amongst them. So it was tough to get used to, like that sort of instant sort of thrown into it. But I remember spending that week in Bristol City, coming back and sort of speaking with my parents, and I couldn't get Walsall out of my head. For a kid that had grown up in Wiltshire, never really left for other than football, or I don't think even at that point I'd been on a plane or anything. I just sort of isolated in that area to go and see something completely different, a new place, and sort of think to myself, well, I'm probably going to have to move away if I move up there and start sort of my own life, my own path, where I was going to go as a player was sort of tempting me really. And like I say, obviously then Swindon came in and Swansea. And Kenny Jackett obviously was keen for me to go there.
With the Swindon and Swansea, did you speak to them as well? Was it did Hawks was it close to going either way? Was it always Walsall?
Swindon, I got quite a few. Like Iffy Nora was the manager at the time, and since I've gone on and done my level 2 with Iffy for the FA, and it was funny to sort of catch up with him. And he was like, "Look, we were desperate to try and get you here," and I was like, at the time, it was just for me. It was more the sort of getting away from that sort of bubble that I was in, and all my not getting away from my friends, but I think sometimes your path can be sort of led. You can go out with your mates and go down the pub, or rather than focus on football, and that's all I've ever wanted to do. So for me, it seemed like a good sort of way of sort of getting myself out completely away from it, living, breathing football, and obviously giving myself the best opportunity to make a success of the opportunity that I got.
Definitely. And so you've signed for Walsall, you've come on your debut as a substitute in a 1-0 victory over Bournemouth. Do you remember that day?
Yeah, again, it took me back to being almost like a kid, and sort of that feeling of playing on cold Sunday mornings and getting soaking wet, and all he ever dreamed about was playing professional football and playing at the sort of highest level you could do. obviously coming on and that night, I think I scored a header. I was absolutely buzzing. Looked across on offside, so it would have been a dream come true to sort of score on your debut. And
it's funny you say that, because that's my next question. Is to go on to, you then 4 days later made your Football League debut. So you've gone from signing for Walsall. 4 days later, you're at Bournemouth, playing against Bournemouth in the Cup, making your debut, getting a win under your belt. Then 4 days later, you're going then on to playing at your first Football League debut.
Yeah.
That must have been a surreal week in the sense of, you, like you said, you've gone from working in this undergarment factory, playing semi-professional football, to suddenly you're in a professional atmosphere. You've got all these big teams and stadiums probably you go into in the space of a week. How did your life kind of flip? Where was the moment where this is no longer a dream, this is reality?
I think driving up there, like as soon as I'd obviously signed on loan, because I think the way it worked, I needed to sign on loan till January, and then obviously in January the window opened and I could make it permanent. So it was done that it was like a 2.5 year, but with like a little bit of a loan, and then obviously the contract. But I think we signed on a Wednesday, and then obviously on the Thursday or Friday I was travelling up there with my boxes of my 3 or 4 boxes of stuff. That was it. It was just like all of a sudden I'd moved out of my bedroom at home, and I was in a hotel. I was in the hotel for 2.5 months to start with, which is a long time, sort of in a hotel, and I think I had the same sort of dinner 30, 40 times, because it was just, I was living sort of like a hotel life. But as soon as, like say, I left home with the boxes and we started driving, that's when it hit me that this was it now, that I was doing what I was doing.
When you talk about, like, you've gone up there, so reality's hitting you, you're staying in a hotel the night. Have you met your teammates at this point? Have you met some of the other players from the club?
Yeah, just from the trial. But again, they obviously they probably see hundreds of players come from the trial and stuff like that. So you couldn't ask for a better group. Like say some of the Scott Dan and Anthony Gerrard and Danny Fox, they were just big names that obviously at that level again that I'd seen and that have gone on. Obviously Scotty is still keeping contact with Scotty, and obviously seeing him at Palace, and he's had a fantastic career. But at the time we were sort of living together. We were in a hotel, and then we moved into the goalkeeper's gigs. The goalkeeper Mick Kearns at the time at Walsall, like we lived together, me and Scotty, for about 6 months, and then I managed to buy a flat and he moved in with me. So I don't think I could have probably got through that time without that group. They were like a great group. Come pick me up from the hotel and take me out and to make me feel part of it.
Going back to all these emotions, you're in a hotel room. It's the day before you're in the squad for a game against Bournemouth. Do you sleep? Do you stay up? What do you do? Because I can imagine, even if we've got a game, or I remember the first FA Cup game, I was on the coaching staff. I barely slept the night before because I was so. It's not nerves; it was just excited, and you just want it to be 3 p.m. You're thinking, I just want it to be 3, and you're laid there, and it's like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. You're thinking, I need to sleep. I've got as a coach. It's fine in some way because, yes, I've got to G you up, but I'm sitting on the bench when this all kicks off. Yeah. But as a player, if you've got lead legs, it's going to be a bit difficult. Or does the adrenaline just boost you up, I assume?
Yeah, I think, like I say, the adrenaline was a big part. But I think, again, the group we had and the staff we had, they were great. And they were, like I say, we had so many plans of what to eat. Like the food we got on the ground was unbelievable. Like going from, say, living at home and having a sort of fry up on a Saturday morning for a game, and just all the things that you just did at that age. You didn't but then going and your diet changes, and like what you're drinking changes, and how much water you're taking on. And I say it was just, for me, it was just a life changer of where I had been and what I wanted to do, and then sort of a realisation of what was actually involved. It wasn't just you go home, clean your boots, bring your boots and your pads to the game, and off you go. Like there was so much more away from the club that you had to do to give yourself the best opportunity. You
touched on it there with regards to going up from stepping up, say, from conference football or non-league football to football league. Does everything change? Even like you said at Walsall, suddenly did it go from this is your diet, this is what you will eat? Is it very structured? You eat at this time of day, these foods, this, etc., or is it more flexible? But you can't have this. You can have anything but these things. How's it all work?
Yeah, I think obviously we had the Steve Staunton's, Mark Kinsella, Paul Merson's joining in training. So you obviously saw you were constantly immersed in what they do. So you see them eating, like you'd go up and you sausages or pasta, and then you look over and they'd just be having a salad and a bit of fruit and stuff like that. So you're instantly sort of thinking, well, why aren't they having loads of pasta? Why aren't they? But obviously they were at different sort of ages of their sort of career in football. So I spent a lot of time with the physio John, and he ended up going on to be the manager for a couple of seasons. But he sort of said to me, look, you're at different stages. Like they're trying to maintain a certain weight, not eat too much. They're not playing week in, week out. They're not training probably as hard as what you will be at 21. So you need to be eating this, pastas. You need to be eating rices. You need to be eating fish. All things that I'd never go out and buy salmon. How do you cook salmon? I cook bacon, I cook eggs, but you're sort of instantly learning that it's not like it used to be. And like I say, I'm very lucky that I had the opportunity to go there, and I think I've learned so much in that time. But I still use, like now in my life, I try and obviously give the kids fish as often as I can, and try and make their diet as good as what it can be, because I realise how important that is to everyday function, not just as a footballer, but just in your life. You need to be eating a balanced diet. So I learned a lot at that time, and really sort of a lot of lessons that I took into my life going forward.
No, that's good. So your time at Walsall then changes. You join conference side Kidderminster Harriers in November 2006 on a 2-month loan. After arriving, there was a term used, made a mammoth impact, I've got here. After impressing during the loan, you moved there permanently in the January 2007 on a 2.5-year contract. How was that kind of going from being in the Football League of Walsall? You've dropped back down now to the conference. Was there, when you turned up, was there a level of, this guy has been in the Football League, was there that respect level, or did it feel like you were still kind of having to earn the respect, or how did it all work, that contrast back into the non-league?
It definitely felt like, I say, I'd gone there a little bit on loan and sort of met it, and I'd done quite well, but I'd gone back to Walsall and just spoke to them and been like, obviously, you sort of pride kicks in and you want to be a Football League player. Like you've been given that chance, you've done it, and I still had a year left on my contract, but I was so desperate. I didn't want to leave league football. I worked so hard to get there, and then obviously again speaking to my parents, they were like, "Look, do you want to be a sort of league footballer who's made 100 appearances for a career, or do you want to get out and play football, get back to doing what sort of got you there, like your passion and enjoyment, and play 50 games a season and score 25 goals, 30 goals, but you've played a part, or would you want to just sit on the bench, come on and sort of pick up the accolades at the end of the season for a bit part player?" And that was sort of, again, the sort of the conversations I needed to have, and made me realise what I was about and what I wanted to do. I wanted to play 50 games a season. I wanted to get knocks and come off and sort of be stitched up and get back on. I don't want to be sat on the bench and watch everyone else do it. It was a realisation that that's what I wanted to do, and like I say, Kidderminster, I thank them for obviously what they took, a sort of gamble really on me and gave me that opportunity, and I hope in a way I sort of paid that back.
I was just saying, it was a gamble that did pay off. And so I've got the next bit here, was in 2007, you got to the FA Cup Trophy Final. You scored the first and second goal at the new Wembley. When you go to play that game, so you know this is the first ever game back at the new Wembley, and you score one, that is something, bribery rights forever, isn't it? Yeah, bragging rights, apologies, forever. You can go and tell your mates, I was the first ever person to score at the new Wembley, and then you scored a second one. What goes to your head at this point? You've walked out, and I've got started. It was 53,262 people at that game. Is that even the Oxford United playoff final wasn't that large? So when you've walked out the tunnel and you've seen this stadium over half full, what's going through your head? And Wembley itself, for people that haven't been Wembley, it's huge. And when even you go, I took my daughter to watch like the FA Cup Finals for the women's, and it wasn't as full as most games were there, but the atmosphere is still, because of the shape of it, the noise, and you go into this stadium, 53,000 people, like you said, only a couple of years before, you're at Chippenham. So you've walked into this, you've gone from factory life, all the demands of getting there, you've gone to Football League, you drop back down, and next minute you're in the FA Cup Trophy Final. What is going through you when you walk out into that stadium?
I remember going there. We went there on the Thursday, I think, and we just to acclimatise, really, like get used to what we're going to be walking into on the Saturday. But we sort of came away from that, and I think we trained on the Friday, and we had sort of meetings on Friday night and just conversations about obviously the game and how we were going to set up. And I remember just little bits like where we just sit and sort of discuss our own how we've got to this point. And I remember sort of saying, obviously for me, leaving Walsall was a tough decision, but it was to play big games and be part of big games. And obviously coming in November, and I think I played the first couple of rounds for like December of that competition.
Yeah,
so
you did.
I had played basically the full part in it, and that
you got a hat trick
really
against Vauxhall Motors. You did. You're bagging goals up to the final. So.
Yeah. And it just really in my mind it gave me that sort of, I was at ease knowing that I had made the right decision. I had left. I remember having that sort of conversation on the Friday night with Dad and Mum and just saying, look, for me, I'm at ease. I know I made the right decision for this reason. Like I'm at Wembley the night before the game. Like we're playing in a final tomorrow, and I could have been at Walsall sat on the bench. I could have been towards the end of the time I left. I was travelling with the team, but I wasn't even involved. So. For me, I was just sat in the stand in my tracksuit, not even being part of it. So obviously, I would have loved to have stayed in league football, but for me, I wanted to play football more than be part of a team that I knew I could sort of do it. And that was the other part of it. I think leaving was I needed to prove to myself I could still do it. I knew I could do it. Obviously, my parents knew, my players that I'd played with and family knew that I could do it, but it was just proving that I could go out there and do it and know that I'd made the right choice to go and do it.
And I think you're absolutely right there. You finished the season top goal scorer as well for Kidderminster, but I think you've touched a spot there where you say you knew you had it in you to push higher. It was a case of not giving up, really. You had to keep pushing yourself, and I think it's very easy for non-league players to. You have one season where it's an average one, then you can have a season where you have an absolutely outstanding season, but no one notices you, and then you have another season you're outstanding. You're thinking, when's the break going to happen? But like you said, you had that one game where Merson's on the sideline and you've had that opportunity, you've taken it, you've bagged yourself, and then your next minute you got a phone call. Within months of your life, it's just gone, bro, that week, completely flipped. And it is that keeping that level of consistency, I guess, and really believing in what you've got, because it is hard to drop off, especially when you say you want to make your family proud. You got a job that you want. You know, what do I do? Do I stay in football? Do I work full time? Yeah. And I think, obviously, from the long run, as we go through it, you made the correct decision. But it could have been completely different. But my next bit is you finished the season top goal scorer. On deadline day, Shrewsbury Town come for you. What's going through your head? You've got a League 2 club, so you've got your opportunity to go back up into Football League. How does deadline day work? Was it one of these dramatic deadline days? Did you get a phone call late, early, midday? How does it all work?
Yeah, again, like we trained that morning, and there'd been loads of conversation, and I think Shrewsbury came in early in the window, like early in January, and they were like, "Nah, we're not selling." Like he's a big. Obviously, spoke to me and said, "Look, we're desperate to keep hold of you. You've obviously got a year or so left on your contract. Like it's only sort of 12 months since you came in. Like there's still so much more to do here." So obviously, we'd had a little bit of a hangover from Wembley. We'd obviously lost that game, and having been sort of 2-0 up, to lose it was hard. And like I say, I had a double hernia operation that summer as well. So I was sort of struggling to sort of get back to fitness from that. And I say on the pitch, we weren't sort of pulling up trees. And obviously they came in and sort of showed a bit of interest in January. Like I say, I was disappointed that they sort of turned it down without sort of asking me the question, really. So... And then come sort of later in January, like deadline day, and obviously as a player sort of playing non-league, everybody's excited, like, oh, is your phone ringing? Like everybody's talking about it. And we trained, and then we came in and we'd been told that obviously Shrewsbury had come back in and they were sort of discussing a contract and a sort of fee and everything. So just to sit tight. So this was sort of 1 o'clock, I think. I think it might have been a Sunday, because we had played on the Saturday. I think we'd lost. They got us in Sunday, and we were running around the outside of the stadium. It was a bit of a punishment, I think, but they said, "Look, this is what's happening. So sit tight." So we were I was sat in the change room and sat there till about 3 or 4. And I remember Scotty Bevan turned up, like the goalie, and I was thinking, like, "What are you doing it?" and he was like, "Oh, they've come up with some sort of deal. We're both going." So we were sat in this was like 4 o'clock. We were still sat there, like they were just like, "Look, just sit tight." And it got to about 6 or 7, and we were like, "We're starving. We've been here all day." So we were like, "Right, go get some food, come back." So me and Scotty went and got something to eat, come back at sort of 7 or 8, and still nothing. Like they're still freshening it out and trying to sort stuff. So again, we were just sat in the ground till it was probably about 10 after 10.
Yeah. Chatting
with obviously the secretaries, and the gaffer was there, and he was obviously trying to get players in if we were going to go out. So it was manic. And then I think it was probably about 11 o'clock. They just said, "Look, it's done. Drive to Shrewsbury." And we were like, "Well, we're in Kidderminster. Like it's about half an hour, 40-minute drive." So me and Scotty jumped in the car, shot over there. I don't think we've ever got there so quick. Like that. So we just thought we've got to get there before. Then walked in, and obviously Shrewsbury manager was there, and the chairman and stuff, and they were like, "Look, this is a contract. There's no negotiating. That's it. Like, obviously sign it if you want to be here. If you don't. Like, it literally time. It needs to be done now." So I say briefly, sort of, he went in one of the boxes for sort of to watch the game. I was in a box about 3 down, just so we couldn't sort of discuss what he was getting, what I was getting. Yeah. They put us completely sort of isolated us. We had sort of 5 minutes to just read through it. I didn't have an agent, obviously, never really had an agent.
So you're reading this contract yourself, thinking...
I'm reading it myself, literally just thinking, please don't, like, I'm not the best reader. I'm thinking, don't mess up here, like saying they can just cancel my contract at any minute. But just briefly trying to get all the points that were important, the years, obviously, where I was going, what was happening with my contract at Kidderminster, how that was going to work. Sorted it all out, like I say, signed it, I think 10 to 12 or something, got it faxed off, and like I say, that was it. The next morning we were travelling up to Shrewsbury to play for them.
You touched on something at the start. When Shrewsbury came then and put a bid in and it got rejected or turned away, at that point, did you know they'd put a first bid in, or did you not?
It literally because again, I didn't have an agent, which obviously looking back through my career, there's been times where I thought like that would have been handy to have on, but then other times I think like, you know what, like my dad's always had my best interest at heart. He's always been there for every important decision. He's always been the man that sort of I've looked up to and respected. Whatever he said, I've took on board. And for me, having that those people around you is a massive. Yeah. The amount of players you see nowadays that have sort of people around them that haven't really got their best interests at heart, and it makes a huge difference having that. So for me, obviously having sort of been able to sort of speak to him and said, "Look, this is and taken on board what his advice was," it made it sort of a decision. But then obviously with the Kidderminster not being given the opportunity to even, as soon as I found out, when everyone else found out, and it had been rejected, and for me, it was the first time where I was thinking, well, I would have liked to have known, or I would have liked to, like, obviously with Chippenham and everything was on the table. Like, they kept me in the loop. They sort of did everything right by me, letting me know about everything. With that, it just seemed a little bit like...
Well, I guess as well, when you're playing non-league football and you want to go that way to make it permanent, full-time professional, it's difficult in the sense of, if you don't know these opportunities, it could hold you back. And opportunities don't always come around. And as you know, and I myself knows, football doesn't, as a footballer, your career is like that. You're playing for someone for a few years, next minute, and as a coach, when we're looking at players, you kind of, there's milestones of ages where you think, oh, they've just gone over that, you know, they've just hit 21, they're not really young anymore, or they're late 28, 29, oh, are they finished product kind of. Nowadays, obviously, where diets, etc. have come in, and sports science, players are playing a lot longer, and to a lot, when you look at players like Ryan Giggs, Ricky Lambert, etc. like that, you got players playing a lot older and just making their way down the leagues after. But I think definitely when you're a non-league player, you don't want someone not to tell you things. You need to know. If you were playing Football League, maybe it's a different ball game because you're in professional football. You're at the standards you want to be. Obviously, you want to keep pushing, but at least you know you are a full-time footballer. So
anyone I've played with, especially non-league, everybody's got a desire to play in the Football League or play higher. And I say, having been through that as a pathway and been in the league and been in the cup, like, it's not all about playing in the Football League. But I think as a young player, as a player that's played at a level, dropping down to Kidderminster, and like I say, I was clear that was my aim, was to come, get myself back to what I know I can do and what I can do to get back in the Football League. That was that's what I found tough, because I had made the decision to drop the level because I wanted to get back up to that level. So to then almost feel like that opportunity was taken away was tough. But like I say, hoping that, luckily, sort of on deadline day, it did sort of get rectified and it did get sorted out.
So you have the season with Shrewsbury, and then at the end of the season, the following summer, they're looking at signing Grant Holt and Richard Walker. And then what goes through your head as a striker seeing these attackers coming into a squad?
I remember coming back and we came in obviously on sort of the first day of pre-season, our bags and trainers. And probably, arguably, the hardest I'd worked through the summer. I remember having chronic shin splints and the pain I was getting because I was just out every day running. For me, this was like a huge opportunity. I sort of worked with again a great group of players for sort of 6 months, and coming in pre-season, I sat there, obviously Grant Holt, Richard Walker, players that I'd known and respected. Really, they're great at what they do and what I wanted to emulate. So see those sort of type of players sat there, my heart just sank, and I just thought, wow, this is everything I've worked for. And sort of looking back, going to Walsall, Merson got sacked, having to leave, going to Kidden, every time I got where I wanted to get to, something had happened that almost turned it on its head. I thought I'd made it, bang, something had happened, I got to fight my way back. This just felt like another occasion where I was sort of done everything I had done, got myself fit, desperate to go and impress. And like I say, 2-3 days into pre-season, can we have a word? Got the call, got in the office, and that was it. You're not going to play this season. We've signed 2 players. They're experienced. They've got everything we're after. So you're going to sort of have to make do and be sort of 4th, 5th choice striker. If you want to stay, that's fine, but you've got to be aware that's going to be where you're at. So
difficult.
What do you do? You're back in the same situation. You're in the Walsall situation again. Do I stay and just try and fight it out and try and force my way in the team, or do I look to get out and play football? And I think a big part of the Kidderminster thing was probably my decision making on leaving Shrewsbury and getting back to playing. And obviously, if it wasn't Oxford United, it might have been a different story. But having played against them at Kidderminster and having sort of friends that were at the club, I knew what the club was about and how big the club was. And like I say, it made probably that decision to leave Shrewsbury a tiny bit easier.
But Oxford come for you, and I remember going to some of them grounds in the conference, and compared to the Kassam Stadium, it was 2 different types of clubs. You'd be away at, I can't think off the top of my head now, but you'd turn up and some of these were a little bit of standing there, but it would be no different to your non-league setup really. But then you go on to the Kassam, and it's a 12,000 capacity stadium. This is the size of Fulham's type of ground holds that. And I remember teams used to come to us, and it would be like their cup final almost, playing from a non-league team to come to the Kassam. And I remember Oxford really struggled for a while in the conference. It took 4 years overall to get back up. And I remember, and I'm sure it was that psychological effect of it. It was their cup final. We'd be going on a brilliant run, and then something would happen. But Oxford come for you. What goes through your head? Shrewsbury obviously have got these players. Oxford have tapped on the door and said, would you be interested? It's come back down to non-league. Do you go there with the intention of, I can play football, or do you go the intention of, I can play and push this team back into Football League? Because that was every season we were expected to win the league. Every season it was Oxford have got to do it. What goes through your head?
I think I met with Darren Patterson at the time. He obviously had the link with Paul Simpson, who was the Shrewsbury manager. Obviously, Paul Simpson had played for Oxford, so that was where the link came. And obviously, Darren called me and said, "Look, obviously, I spoke to Shrewsbury. They're keen for you to get out playing, and they see this as a good club for you to be able to do that." So obviously, I was straight in the car, straight down to Oxford, met Darren. Obviously, from what he was telling me, for me, straight away walking in there, I was thinking this club isn't a conference club. This is a Football League club. Obviously, I just left Shrewsbury, and I felt this club was bigger than that, just because I knew so much more about Oxford. I knew the history, some of the players, like I say, growing up and sort of living not far from there, sort of Chippenham, Malmesbury, that way. You hear about Oxford, you hear about the teams they had and the players they had. So for me, it was just I was desperate to try and get this team back where they should be and where they belong. and sort of having played at Kidderminster and sort of Chippenham at non-league level, you couldn't compare the clubs really in terms of size and fan base and everything like that. I was just thinking, well, for me, it'd be like playing in front of league crowds, but in the conference,
it was.
I felt obviously playing at the Kidderminsters, and I felt like I was able to play at that level and do well. So for me to obviously leave Shrewsbury was again another tough decision, because I was turning my back on sort of league football, but it's sort of that path just continued of ups and downs, and this for me just felt like another chapter of that, and another chance for me to go out and prove what I can do and get back to playing, and obviously playing for a massive club and sort of seeing what they have and set up and players was a big part of me making that decision.
So you've signed. So at this point, you've signed for Oxford in the 2008-2009 season. You made your debut. It was a 3-0 defeat we had, and then a week later, you scored 2 and assist 1 in a 6-3 win over Eastbourne. Yeah. What at that point? You've just gone. So as a striker, when you sign for these clubs, what's there's that pressure of I need to score, and getting those early goals in. Like obviously 7 days later, you've bagged 2 and assisted. Yeah. Does everything lift off your shoulders and everything seems easier? How does it all work at that point?
Yeah, I'd say pressure-wise, it felt almost as much as from going from Chippenham to Walsall. Like I felt like obviously I know I was leaving Shrewsbury, but again, this was I was sort of 24, 25. That I wasn't young anymore, and I was thinking to myself like I need to sort of almost kickstart my career again. This has been a sort of theme where I've like gone somewhere, I've been let go, and then I've gone somewhere, and then so for me, this was I felt even just going there, this was my opportunity. I had to sort of take hold of this and really do everything I can, and sort of try and forge myself a career where I can look back and say like, oh, I spent 10 years at this club, I scored 250 goals. Like obviously I've seen the Rooneys and the Shearers, and I wanted to emulate that. I wanted to be that person that everybody loved and said like, oh, he gives everything. And I came in like with, it's crazy obviously looking back now and having sort of been there and done it, but that was my aim. I wanted to come in and I wanted to really put a stake down and be like, obviously I know I've been let go of from Shrewsbury and Walsall, but I've always bounced back. I've always done what I've needed to do to get back and do well. And I felt exactly the same coming in, that I knew I could do that. I knew I could come in and score 30 goals a season, or it was just going to be given the opportunity and given the sort of players that I had sort of found out they had at the club. And I remember signing and that Jamie Guy came in, and I remember speaking to fans and they were more excited about him. They were like, he was the next big thing. And for me, I was thinking, well, like I've played at a higher level. Like I'm coming in like just the same. Like I'm coming in with that. But everything seemed to be about him and how excited he was going to, how excited they were to see him.
Does that work in your favour though? Something like that?
To start with, I think so. Just because I sort of went under the radar a little bit. Like I was just knuckling down like training and like I say, I remember training and the press were there and they were speaking to him. And for me, I was just desperate to get going. And like I say, age-wise as well, I was a few years older, and I think that sort of made a difference. He was sort of the new kid on the block. I was, like I say, 25. I was sort of expected to just come in with that experience and hit the ground running. So it was probably took a little bit of pressure off me, and obviously I put a ton of pressure on myself anyway, just naturally. But I think for me just to focus on getting out playing and hopefully sort of turning the sort of run that I'd been on of getting settled somewhere and having to move on, that I was desperate to not let that happen.
Yeah, and I remember you kind of assessed it. We had Rob Duffy up front for us prior to yourself signing. I remember he was banging goals and he went to Wrexham from memory. So we'd had kind of always good strikers at the club, but a good striker only comes with 10 other good players around him. When you sign for these clubs, do you look at what players are there previously or are there at the time, etc.? So you kind of look at them and think, well, this is the type of striker I am. Have they got that to support me? Or is it a case of, I just want to play football, they're a good setup, get me in and I can change it?
A little bit. I think the season before, I think they lost on penalties.
Yeah.
I think they lost to Wrexham on penalties. I remember sitting at home watching it on TV and just sort of looking. And I had a little bit of sort of background on the players, so I knew what they had there, and I knew with sort of Yemis and players that were there, they were getting enough balls in the box. If you could get in the box and get on the end of things, there would be goals there. So For me, that was never really, like I say, luckily they'd been on TV and I'd followed obviously the league and I knew sort of the players they had there. So as soon as he came in, I didn't really need to do too much checking. Obviously, he's made it clear they're going to be signing a few players, and I think Lewis Haldane came in, and other players with obviously a lot of qualities that were going to help me improve and get me goals. So I was aware that they were going to be bringing in sort of good players and better players, and hopefully, like I say, this was going to be the year that they had a right go and try to get back into the Football League.
And like you said on that one, people don't understand. Oxford, like you said, we're in the conference, but we would get some games a season on Sky Sports when there was breaks on. So they were, like you said, you look at the players, but also I guess it's that pride sense of it's a big club I've been offered. Let's give it a go. Chris Wilder in the January 2009 wanted to extend your loan, and then his words were emphasising this is what we're trying to build here. So you obviously had a lot of confidence in yourself. That season you did finish with, I've got the stat here, 26 goals in 49 games. Obviously at that point you're on loan from Shrewsbury. Your value is going like that for them because they're thinking, well, he's only on loan. When that finished, obviously they made it permanent. Was it difficult? Because there's a line here where it was agreed permanent contract in the April 2009.
Yeah.
But it was denied by Shrewsbury, who stated they had not yet completed. What happened there? So was it a case of you had Chris Wilder said, we want to sign this player, we need to have him here and build a squad around him, and then you think you're staying, and then Shrewsbury gone, no, we're not selling. How did it all work out?
It was literally probably the first couple of weeks of him being there. We had a big meeting, and he was like, look, I want the club, you're going to be the figurehead, basically. I'm going to bring players in around you, like build a team around you. You're going to take this club forward with me and obviously all the staff. And for me, I was just like, I'd never had that relationship with a manager. I just felt at ease straight away. And it's funny, like just his sort of conversation just made me feel at home, like this is where I wanted to be. Like I had a manager that 100% had confidence in me, gave me sort of the ability to just go out and play football. Like all that sort of stuff had been taken away. It was just like, look, we want to give you 3 years contract. We want you to be here and everything. So I'd say he came in January. This was probably early February, March. But it was all signed, done and dusted, which I think it was meant to be one of those things that were just kept in a drawer till May and then announced. Obviously, this was like the early sort of starts of social media. And for me, obviously, I picked up the phone and was sort of messaging fans like, I'm delighted to be staying for 3 years and all this. And I think probably just naiveness for me and everything and probably caused a bit of a storm, obviously, with the Shrewsbury fans because they were like, look, he's scoring like 25 goals.
Exactly.
Like, we want him back. But obviously, it was already signed. It was done and dusted. So I remember hearing an interview, like I think Jerome played it on BBC News, and it was like, it showed the game highlights and then it showed an interview and he was saying like, oh, he's a silly little boy, he needs to keep his mouth shut and all this. And I was thinking, well, I've signed. Like all the things he was saying was just, I don't know, I think probably just to sort of try and cool everybody down and keep it quiet. But for me, I knew I'd already signed for Oxford. Paper was done. I checked with obviously Chris and then like I say, after about a week or two, it went quiet and then it was announced I had signed and it was all done and dusted. It had been done for months.
Well,
but
when you went to Shrewsbury, there's a bit here that says you were billed as being the striker to help Shrewsbury push them back to the playoffs. Obviously, it didn't work out how you thought it would. You've gone to Oxford. You've had that season where you scored 26 goals, 49 games. You claimed the Oxford Supporters Player of the Year, the Players Player of the Year. You got the permanent move in the end. And you won the Conference Player of the Year as well. So, like you said, you're a Shrewsbury. If I was a Shrewsbury fan, I'm spitting feathers. I'm thinking, we've just let our top striker on stats now go. And did you have any of this, like your ex-teammates, such as Shrewsbury, or any of your fans are pinging you like, don't go, or how was it all kind of left?
It was like the early sort of stage of social media, so I was having fans and obviously nowadays, God, it's like that would have been a different world back then. I obviously kept in contact with mates that were playing for him and obviously that I was sad to be sort of leaving a good group of lads that I'd sort of spent 6 months getting to know and obviously one of the lads, Ace Hall, like he was obviously my best man at my wedding, so from that sort of meeting we've gone through to have like a lifetime of friendship from one sort of 6 months at a club. So it was tough to be leaving them, but on the other hand, I'd gone there to prove what I could do. I was doing that. And I still speak to, let's say, some of the fans of Shrewsbury, and they say, look, we don't feel you were given a chance. Like, you came in and you did well in that 6 months you were there. I remember we played MK Dons. Paul Lynch was the manager. We had 3-1 down. I scored 2. We drew 3-3, and that was like my sort of, I'd do that, and then I'd be out of the team again for like 6 weeks, and I just couldn't get my head around it. Every time I was given an opportunity, I felt like I did all right, and I did what they wanted me to do. But for whatever reason, I say, you go through your career, and there's sometimes your face just doesn't fit. And obviously, as a manager, he wanted these experienced players. And you look at Grant Holt, what he managed to do after that, going on to Norwich. He had a fantastic career, and you can't argue at the time that was the right decision what they made. But obviously, for me, I'd signed there, and I went to Shrewsbury with the intention to do the same as what I did at Oxford: go there, play, score goals, and be successful. So for me to not be able to do that, obviously, it's tough. But then, like I say, coming to Oxford, it made that decision a little bit easier just because of them and how big they were.
Did you have, before I move on to the next bit, where obviously Oxford wanted to make it permanent and you got all these accolades at the end of the season and awards, did anyone else try and sneak in and pinch you? Or you don't know?
I don't know. I think, like I say, in my career, like there was times where obviously you get calls from certain managers that were like, obviously, against, like, they shouldn't be doing that, but because I didn't have an agent, they didn't really know how to get to me any other way than to give you a call, which, like I say, it goes on every day, day in, day out, up and down the country. This sort of like agents and players calling players directly and managers, and it goes on. But obviously at the time, I was so focused on obviously once I spoke to Oxford, like I'd come away and again spoke to Dan, and for me, my mind was I wanted to be there. I think the day that I signed, I think we played Oxford City in a friendly, and we were I think Dad was getting calls from like Wimbledon and a few other clubs, and they were like, look, before you sign, like we'd love to have a conversation. And we were like, obviously it's too late, I've already signed it. But then they came back in after I left Oxford in 2014. They came back in and Wimbledon, and I think like even then it's not something, obviously the travel where they're based, it was just not something that really interested me. Traveling, I was happy where I was. I didn't want to be travelling in and out of London, so I always took a lot of time over sort of things like that. Like, it was never like a snap decision, but like I say, with Dad and Mum and having conversations, I always arrived at the decision that was right for me, both sort of on and off the field.
With regards, just touching that, when you get offered these new clubs, fans obviously just see it as he'll want to come to us, we're a bigger club, etc. But I think you do forget you have families behind the scenes. You've got relatives that live nearby. You've got your kids. You've got a wife that could potentially have a job nearby, etc. What goes through? Is it a moment where, especially like we said, going from non-league into football league, you kind of, it's an opportunity of a lifetime. It's different when you're at a Premier League club and another Premier League club wants you. You can kind of, the money's there to bounce things around, I guess. But when you're down that end of the scale with the non-league going to football league, and you get these transfer offers, you do have to take into account all what you want your family to do and how they're fit. Was that ever an issue when you moved to a club, or was it always they very supportive by the sounds of it from day one?
Yeah, they've always been supportive, but I think, like I say, you could go up and down the leagues and you'll see players that jump from certain clubs to bigger clubs just because it's a bigger club, and you'll see their careers just gone down. It's like it happens all the time. And for me, as a player that's been through it, I'd love to be involved in some way and back with sort of young players coming through and be like, look, it's not all about jumping from step tier 6, 7 to Championship League 1. Obviously, you've got success stories. You've got Tyrone Mings, who I know really well, and obviously he left sort of Chippenham and Yate and's gone on to Ipswich and Villa. But that's not always the case, and I think if you speak to him, he'd be saying the same thing. It was tough. Like you sort of travelling a hell of a long way from your family. It makes a big difference on what sort of goes on day to day. And obviously for me, looking back, Walsall was a really tough time. There was many nights I sat there and thought, like, have I made the right decision? I've left all my mates, I left my family, I've left everything, and I've moved sort of 150, 200 miles away. I'm living in a hotel, I'm sort of isolated from people. Have I made the right decision? Obviously, I was nowhere near fit enough or potentially good enough to be playing week in, week out at that level. I knew how much work was going to be involved to get there. And I was quite comfortable at Chippenham, and I was happy, and I sort of could see my mates every sort of evening.
Definitely.
And you sit there and you do question it, and I say it's a tough industry. I'm not saying it's not, but I say from what I've done in my career, I've loved every minute. Obviously, I've had times where it's been tough, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And I think, like I say, a lot of players make decisions probably for wrong reasons, and like I say, probably surround themselves with the wrong people, and it can be sort of devastating, really, in terms of a career path and like a longevity of a career. So
no, definitely.
I'm
and like you
just
said,
very
you could
thankful
take,
that I've had the people around me.
Yeah, and you could take your family, move the other side of the country, to then 6 months later it all happened again. So so go on to 2010 season. So it ended up being a very, probably for yourself, a memorabilia one, and you remember everything that went on. But you started with floods of goals, scored 6 in 11 appearances, and there's one that stands out for me in this stat. You scored a hat-trick in the 4-0 victory against Chester City. Do you remember this? And do you remember then getting when they got basically removed from the Football League?
Yeah.
Do you remember, from football, do you remember them then saying they've been scrubbed off? Do you remember having that?
Yeah, I remember they obviously came and said, look, they've gone, and but at the time it didn't really seem, they were like, oh, like you goals and stuff from the game would probably be taken away, but it didn't really seem too great a sort of impact. But obviously, as I've gone through my career and got to the end of obviously leaving, it made a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely.
To what obviously being the all-time top scorer or being like not the all-time top scorer. So obviously made a difference from that. But at the time, it was just obviously disappointing because I scored a hat trick. But I remember at the time they were like, oh, like about having the ball back, and I was like, like the kit man, I was like, you can't have the ball back. It's signed. It's like in a box at home.
Did they actually?
And things like that. So obviously at the time, the club where they were, they didn't have. They weren't in the sort of luxuries they have now, but I've still got the ball.
Yeah,
I was good. It's a strange one to look back on and have sort of realise that obviously it doesn't sort of, it's not on the record books. It's not like, but then obviously you compare that to now, you've got players that have scored 25 goals this season that's been taken away. So
this is where, exactly.
It's mad.
That's exactly where
it hurt me, and I only lost 3, and I only lost. But I think that season I still got a suspension because I got booked in that game, and the suspension still stood. So later on down the line, that yellow card from the game still stood, but it took the goal away.
This is one thing that I was on about on Twitter the other day with some people. And I saw someone tweet it, and that's what caught my eye. It was saying all these players are going to have their goals scrubbed, but what about all the fines players have got throughout the season and all the money that they've paid for these fines? So they can get rebuilt. So it is, isn't it? It's one of them. But
well, I was a nightmare back then. I had too many yellow cards. I was getting in trouble for all sorts of stuff, and I think temper-wise, like I've always had like that little sort of side of me. But yeah, it cost me an arm and a leg throughout the season. And like I say, to lose the goals at the time, it was obviously disappointing and sad. But to obviously then go fast forward to sort of 2014 and then realise those 3 goals. But then also I had another 4 years. I missed a ton of chances. I could have got those goals back anyway. So you can't sort of worry too much. But like I say, I just feel for players now that are going to be losing.
An interesting one from that season was you considered stepping aside as penalty taker. As a striker, and goals are your bread and butter, what went through when you considered doing that? And what made you lead up to that decision? I can imagine what made you lead up to the decision, but what went through your head? And more importantly, did you go through with it? I don't think you did.
Nah, because I say that throughout my career, I've never. I wouldn't say hand on heart. I genuinely enjoy taking penalties. It's a horrible pressure. It's a horrible feeling. Although people see it as like I hear sort of Shearer and Omri, other players that have taken penalties, and it's been like for them, they've been like, oh, I loved it. Like it was a chance to score an easy goal, but for me, I never felt like that. I felt like every time I put the ball down on the spot, the goal just got smaller and smaller and smaller, and the size of the football got bigger and bigger and bigger. For me, it was a horrible pressure. I never really enjoyed that. It just, every club I'd sort of gone to and they were like, oh, you're the striker, you take penalties. It was just naturally assumed that you would take penalties. So I think that's probably why I didn't naturally enjoy it, because it wasn't something I'd gone out to do. It'd just been sort of thrust upon me. I think Chris was like, look, you're taking penalties. That's that. So I just started doing it. But my technique was just put it down and just smash it straight down the middle hard as I could. There was no sort of fought, like trying to give him the
left
eyes or anything.
wherever as long as it's on target.
Yeah. Hit it as hard as you can. Make sure, like, as a goalie, I'm yet to see a goalie just stand still and gamble and just try and catch it. Like, then 9 times out of 10 they're going to dive. And for me, that was my only sort of hope, that they would dive and it would go straight down. And even though I think as time went on, people started to realise what I was probably going to do, but they still tried to go. Yeah. And then I look back and I think penalties against Luton, penalties against Crawley, I tried to mix it up. I tried to go one of the corners and they were saved. So that was where sort of those sort of things started sneaking in. That sort of confidence started to really sort of come down heavy. And every time I got a penalty, I was almost like people were running off to get the ball, and I was like almost letting them run off to get the ball, thinking, "Oh, they're going to take it and take that pressure away from me." So I remember speaking to Chris, and he was like, "Look, obviously you've missed a couple and whatever," and I think he put it out at training and said, "Look, does anyone else want it?" And there was like 15 people there, and everyone wanted to take penalties. But then I think as it went on and we got the next penalty, I think I took that, scored it again, and every time I've missed one, I think like, oh, I'm going to be taken off it again, and then the next one I'd seem to score. So but a couple I missed that season, and like I say, it just sort of knocked my confidence a little bit. Yeah. I think sort of the last couple of years there was Tommy Craddock's and other players that were there that were more confident, that wanted to take them, and like I say, I'd probably give away a couple of goals that I could have scored and got myself that record. So it's probably a bit of my fault for not being more confident about doing it. But
then you do the right thing. If you're not confident, you've let someone else get it, and it helps the team, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I was always taught, especially growing up. Like, if you're not confident, and like I say, if in a certain game you've missed a couple, and that was probably my biggest thing was when I was playing. If I'd missed an opportunity, it would just fester in my mind, and I'd find myself 20 minutes, half an hour later, sort of doing something stupid, sliding in for a tackle I'm never going to win because I'm still frustrated about a chance I'd missed in the first half. So I think that's probably where my sort of lack of confidence in that came in, because I was so much invested in that 90 minutes. I was always thinking about the things that had gone wrong, rather than I couldn't just. I'd spoke to players like Dean Sturridge at Kidderminster, and that had played at the top level, and they were just like, "Look, just forget it, it's gone." Yeah. It's very easy to say that. Like, when I was out there, I really struggled.
You feel like the pressure. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Fast forwarding then, we've gotten towards the end of the season. Playoffs, Rushden and Diamonds. You've scored in the first leg, then it ended up being a 1-0. Second leg, we won it. You scored the second goal in the 2-0 victory. We've now gone to the final. I remember this final clear as day. I remember the playoffs as well. But you've gone Wembley. You've played there before. This time round, I say. It was only 42,669, whilst the time before it was more. When you turned up, was this more pressure or less pressure than the first time you went there?
I think the first time it was like all new experience. It was like we went there and it was a cup, and like I say, it was still important because we'd had 10 rounds or 10 games or whatever to get to that point. But I think the conference final, from where we had been at the start of the season, 10 games or something, 8 wins, a couple of like, we were flying, and then we had a sort of blip mid-season, and obviously we couldn't. I think we went 3-4 weeks without playing because of the weather, and Stevenage played their games, and 10, 12 points clear we were. That was taken away, and they were 10 points clear, and it just that sort of up and down of the season. I remember looking back and thinking it's very reminiscent of like almost my career, like the highs, the lows, and literally we had sort of picked ourselves up. We were on the floor. We were top of the league. Everyone expecting us to win it by 20 points, 30 points. We'd ended up losing it to Stevenage, who were unbelievable that season. They won a ridiculous run of games, winning 17, 18 in a row or something, and fully deserved to win the league. And for us then, it was sort of pick ourselves back up. We had a tough, looking at the playoffs, York, Luton's, Rushdens and us. Like, they're 4 big teams, and going into that, it was always going to be tough. But I think having seen obviously us get through against Rushden and then seeing sort of York beat Luton, we were just thinking, geez, like, this is probably the best scenario we could get. Really, we'd played them the first game of the season, and sort of mentally we thought they were winning 1-0 into the 90th minute to lose 2-1. How is that going to affect them? So we played on that a lot. I think it was 12 days between the Rushden game and the final, and I think we spoke about that a lot. That if we could get into them early and sort of get into their heads, even just when we were lining up in the tunnel, just remind them of that game and remind them of that feeling that they thought they had won it. They thought they were was sort of home and dry, and we came back and fought back and won.
Yeah.
That if we could sort of somehow get in their head before the game, it would make a difference. And I remember in the tunnel sort of shouting things and talking about that game. And as soon as we went out, we started like a steam train. And just the first sort of half an hour, we were desperate to go out and prove what we could do. And luckily, like I say, we managed to do that.
Well, there's a moment, I remember the game starts, obviously we're playing, Matty Green gets the first one, and I remember where I was sat, I was like opposite the dugouts, the other side of Wembley, and I was in the corner, diagonally was where the York fans were. And I remember Matty wrapped his foot round it and went right in the top bin, and I would love to ask him if he meant that. But and I remember he's done that, and
he says he did mean it, but I never seen him.
That went right in the postage stamp. There's no way he could have done it that clinically, but maybe he did. I have to ask him. But then we got yourself going for on goal, and did he try and claim an assist for that? Because when Matty Green, because when that ball goes over the top, it comes off the defender. He runs into the defender. Yeah. It drops through to you. What's going through your head when that ball drops, or are you just in striker mode, you've banged it in? Because you kind of take it in your stride, bang, bottom corner. Or did you have that any moment where you're thinking, how shall I go for this? Or did you just instinct?
The first touch, I remember taking the first touch and thinking like, it's a bit loose. Like I wanted it to be right in my path, but it's gone out a bit wide, so it's forced me almost on my left, which I never really had a problem with that. I'm comfortable shooting on my left, but obviously my right was what I do. If I was running through clean, I'd always try and get it back on my right and finish. But for me, it was like it was so wet. I'd never seen it rain so much. The first 20 minutes, we were absolutely drenched. And I remember it just sort of skidding off my foot and been going out towards the left-hand side and just sort of like, I've just got to hit it low. Obviously, for the keeper, he's not going to want to get down. He was soaking wet. His kit was wet. I thought, look, just keep it low, zip it across. And like I say, as soon as I hit it, it just felt like a clean connection. And
you know when you sort of
whiz underneath him. I knew he was never going to get down in time. And I think then that next sort of 30 seconds, minute was just probably my best feeling in football. Just to know that we had got ourselves in a great position. We felt supremely confident coming into the game anyway. But I think that at that point, that was it. Like we weren't going to let this slip, and we weren't going to throw this away. We got ourselves in the position we wanted to be. And then obviously Mids had a header at the post. I think if that had gone in,
yes, I remember that.
It could have been six. Could have been six. Like I say, at that point we were so confident, and obviously our tails were up, and we sort of smelt blood, and we thought, hang on a minute, we can really send out a message here.
And unfortunately, there was their own goal we conceded, which then rattled for a bit. I was a bit like, 2-1, it's one of them, their tails are up now. And I remember Alfie Potter running through, second half. It's 90th minute at this point. Now, from memory, Alfie's going through, and you're up with him. And it's 2-on-1, and he's gone for it, didn't he?
I came back to the corner, and obviously Reece Days jumped up, headed it out to Sammy, and Sammy and Alfie are just playing sort of passing like when you're in the playground with your mate, just passing it back and forth. I'm just sprinting, probably the hardest I've sprinted in the 90th minute ever. So I'm just thinking, like, I need to be. If he gets up in a position, he's just going to square it. I can get another goal in the game and make it safe. But obviously, as soon as Sammy and Alfie had played, I've just thought I've got to get up there. So I've done everything I can, bust a gut to get there. And as soon as Sammy's played it across to Alfie, I remember their defenders sort of trying to appeal for offside. The linesman's saying play on. As soon as it came to Alfie, I knew he was going to bury it. I think he was a great finisher, but as soon as, like I say, he's got it, controlled it out of his feet and smashed it.
I remember that moment. That was almost like the final whistle there for being in the stand. Because, it's 90th minute, it's 2-1. You're like, and then also when you get a 3-1 in 90th minute, there's no way they're coming back. And I remember I lost my voice. I remember having to go to work the next day. A couple of days later, my voice was gone. I had to explain it. I'd been to the football. It was absolutely crazy. I remember the journey back was crazy. And it was a special moment, especially as an Oxford fan. And then, obviously, you finished the season off. I've got some stats here as well. As Football Conference annual presentation, you got the Conference Player Team Award. You got into the squad for that. And you finish on 26 goals and 44 appearances. Obviously, another phenomenal season for you. And I've got a stat at the end I'll show you, and it was your goal scoring ratio was incredible for Oxford. And then obviously Swindon were interested with you, and you just said no. Was there a moment where it could have, or was it always, no, I'm not going to a local?
No, I think they came in twice before the third bid that was accepted, and it was always the same answer. I remember saying to Chris that obviously I want to be here. This is home for me. Like I've loved being here. Like I was sort of 3 or 4 years into my time there, and like I say, I never wanted to leave there. Even now, like if I can stay there and finish my career, that's what I wanted. That was always my dream.
Yeah, I remember you had an
the
interview
first
on
year or
BBC.
two of being there. So it was not what I wanted to do, and like I say, obviously I made it clear that I wasn't going to be going there. So obviously at the time I was like, what the hell are they doing? Why are they accepting it? Like, but obviously then on the other hand, I get the money situation. I know it was, I think, over 300,000 the fee was, and for the club at the time it's a lot of money, and obviously I know probably in their hearts they didn't want me to go either, but for the finances, for the where the club was and stuff, it probably was going to be key to whether they could continue to sort of fund this team and try and get out of that league. So I sort of get it and that, but at the time I was just, heartbroken that they accepted it.
In a polite term, heartbroken.
I was being forced out. Obviously I was captain. I scored a lot of goals. I'd been a big part of it, and like I say, I'd had to sort of almost deal with the fact that they, in my head, were trying to get me out of the football club. So obviously I left there and sort of made it clear that I wasn't going to go to Swindon. I wasn't signing there. So they just said, look, just go home then. But that was the end. Like I couldn't train. I couldn't be around the lads, which is what I always wanted to do. I never wanted to miss training. And because of this, I had to just go home and like I say, be apart from the group, and everybody else was training. That was the hardest thing I felt, was that I was just not part of. I just wanted to train every day. I didn't want to be sat at home.
Well, you're a footballer,
but because of all the sort of press and everything, they were like, look, you just need to go home, just lock yourself at home, and just we'll be in contact. So that was that. And like I say, I sat at home and rang my dad, and dad sort of said, look, just sit tight, lock the door, don't answer your phone to anyone. And I remember that day was horrendous. I got messages from Oxford fans saying, like, I hope you die, like, I hope you get illnesses and all this sort of stuff. And then Swindon fans said, look, we don't want you to come, don't sign, we don't want you here. And
even though you said you didn't want to, and all
even though it never crossed my mind to sign there. But obviously I remember then speaking to sort of Calvin and Chris and saying, look, I need to tweet something, or I need to let people know that I ain't, because I'm getting abuse, and they were like, look, just leave it with us, we're sorting it. This was like 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I continued to get messages, and I was blocking 50 people a minute, and it was just getting unbearable. So I think it got to about 5 or 6 o'clock, and I just said, look, enough's enough. Like I tweeted, like saying I ain't going anywhere. Like I never wanted to leave the football club, and it just felt like a huge weight off my shoulders. I wanted to let people know that like 7-8 hours earlier, but obviously I wasn't allowed, and obviously I get that. But at the time, all I wanted to do was just go away and me be back training with the lads. And I remember speaking to Calvin about 8 or 9 that night, and he was like, "Look, we've stopped it all. We've rejected the bid, and like just get yourself in tomorrow. We go back, sort of training as normal, but it's not normal." And like I say, we'd already had the conversations, and I'd been told, "Look, my future at the club was going to be limited because the way the club was going to go, they wanted to invest this money and they wanted to bring players in, and the sort of the shape of the team was going to change, and things were going to change, so my time was going to be limited, and things like that." So for me, it was obviously I was desperate to still be there, but I knew I'd been told my sort of dream of being there for sort of 10 years and seeing my career out probably wasn't going to happen, but it still wasn't a decision that I was going to go there anyway. So I just decided, look, you know what, like stay at home, get this out of the way, go back training the next day. But for me, it just that 15-20 minute meeting completely sort of changed probably the next 2 years of my time after that.
Yeah, and I think that's just being human, mate. I think that's just the human coming out in you. So and I don't think, and you know, like you said, by rejecting it, it became a legend at the club anyway.
That's what I was going to say. My relationship didn't change. Obviously, the relationship with the manager and obviously some of the people at the club that obviously were making the decisions, that changed. But like I say, the fans that
you always get the one or two that don't read things properly and will send silly things. And that's just football.
Even going forward after that, I met people that were like, "Oh, I was one of the persons that sent you a load of stick and that, and it was only because I didn't want you to go." And I'm thinking, "Oh, it's like, you said you wished I died like 2 days earlier." But yeah, I like I say, obviously living in that area and obviously being at Oxford as long as I was, I get that sort of rivalry. But I say for me, and again, if times were different and it was happening now, I'd be able to tweet and I'd be able to
well, it is,
do
Twitter and
videos and let it out straight away. But at the time, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
And like I say, I'm glad I made the decision I did, and I loved every minute of being at Oxford.
So then, obviously, 2013 in the November, you scored your 100th goal for Oxford in a victory away from Mansfield, and then going on from there, you were 1 goal short of equalising the club record of 107, and then which obviously you turned down the contract and you ended up signing for Eastleigh. Obviously, that you've kind of just explained what probably your turning point was and why you decided to make that decision. Due to behind the scenes and as well the direction of the club. So you've done your right, gone for yourself. You wanted to do what you thought was best for your career. You signed for Eastleigh, which you ended up playing 161 games.
Years.
So you had a hell of a long time there as well. So you're at that club, you've gone there, and like you say, you go back to that day where Chester City, if you got in 3 goals, your name would have been 109 club record. So that, like you said, I can imagine that's something that I would still claim it if I was you. I was still it's like
I spoke to a bit. Obviously, at the time, like even when I left it was such a tough decision. Obviously, if I didn't have family and I didn't have missus and I didn't have kids, I think I could have said, look, you know what, 30-40% pay cut, a year contract. I'll just do it. Just stay the year, and that could have led on to another year, and I might have been there 10 years. So to look back, it's tough to think that could have happened, but at the time, obviously, it was such a sort of 8-month-old girl, and I remember speaking to Gary Waddock, who was a manager who'd taken over at the time. He was giving me figures from what he was told that he was allowed to give me, and then I was speaking to the chairman, and he was giving me different figures and saying, look, it was up to the manager. So I had the manager and the chairman both telling me different things. I didn't know the trust. They were both new. The chairman, Ian Lenigan, hadn't been there very long, and obviously the manager, Gary Waddock, had only took over 3 or 4 games before the end of the season. So it was like, for me, I didn't know the trust, and obviously the year contract was really the sticking point, because it was just no security for me and my family, and that was my sort of thinking really behind the whole of my career. It was obviously footballing wise, but also I needed to look after my family and make sure I was making the right decision. Looking back, it was a tough decision to make.
Definitely, and I think at the end of the day, football was for your profession. No different to someone being a school teacher or a doctor or a mechanic. That was your profession. At the end of the day, you have to support your family and do what you have to do. So it's that sort of things. I don't think you can't be. No one could knock for that. And like I said, over them 161 games, you bagged in 39, 40 goals for Eastleigh. So you had banging goals again for a club. You then played your time there, and then you joined Poole in the February 18 on a 1-month loan, and then that became a rejoin in the December 18. And then you extend that to the end of the season. You were there, and then you announced your retirement in the February. More going from the retirement side of things, with deciding to retire, what decisions go through your head at that point? You think, is it a pride thing, or is it your body's breaking down thing, or is it you don't want your stats to look back? What goes through your head as making that decision to retire and announce it?
It was more, I think, retiring from full time, because we'd recently had our second daughter who was born with issues with her eyes, so we were committed to being at Great Ormond Street like 3-4 days a week, and travelling back and forth to London. It just made it impossible to. I was obviously going on loan, but I was still sort of contracted to Eastleigh, and I was travelling, like say, up to London on a Monday, a Tuesday and a Friday to see the specialists at Great Ormond Street, and then coming back, travelling with Eastleigh on a Saturday for games, but not being involved because I hadn't trained all week. And it just got to a stage where I was still sort of losing weekends. We were travelling to Gateshead, Barrow, where I was losing all weekend with the club. But obviously I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be with my daughter and with my wife. So it was more a decision to take a step back from full-time football and go in sort of part-time football, training sort of a couple of evenings a week. And it meant I was available to sort of travel to London all week with my daughter and wife, and just make sure that I was doing the best that I could for them, as well as still having that little bit of enjoyment. Although once she was born, that was it. Like my sort of mindset of what was important in life, like, was completely changed. Like, I needed to look after her and make sure she was given everything she needed and given the best opportunity. So if it meant sort of leaving football altogether, then at that sort of month, 2 months, 3 months, that was what, if that was what it took, that's what it was going to take. But as time went on, she got sort of an operation and she got progressively better. My sort of passion came back and I was desperate to be back involved in football. And like I say, I was still at EC, and then they were like, look, take as long as you need. And obviously I was missing weeks and weeks of training. And I said, look, I think it's best if I go on loan. And that's obviously where the Paul move came about in December, just to get back sort of playing. It was sort of 4 or 5 months on from her being born. And I say she was making progress and I wanted to get back playing. It gave me sort of that 90 minutes to be out there playing, enjoying football, where I could switch off from everything else. There was so much going on at home and sort of week in, week out in the hospital. This, for me, was 90 minutes of just focus on the game. A little bit of almost kept me a bit sane, I think, just to get out there and not sort of think too much. I had sort of 90 minutes a week that I knew that I was going to be sort of playing, and I could forget it all.
No, that's fair play to you. And then you had your spell at Hungerford Town, where you were a player coach.
Yeah.
Is that something you're looking to go into, coaching side of things, do you think?
So that was my aim. To be able to coach as well was a big part of it. But sort of as time went on, the sort of assistant manager left, and the manager who was in charge was obviously, he had his ideas and whatever, but I just felt like I couldn't really impact on what I believed or what I was. No. Obviously, I'm a young coach. I'm not saying I wanted to take over and pick the team and things like that, but there were certain occasions where I thought I would have done things slightly differently, or I think some games. I think one of the games, Braintree, I was dropped on at sort of 20-2 on a Saturday, which we had travelled all the way from Bournemouth to Essex to play a game, and to find out an hour and 15 minutes before a game wasn't ideal. And for me, throughout my career, I've always sort of had been told on a Friday, or the least sort of told on a Saturday morning, so you get your head around it. But say, to find out the way I did and things like that, it just wasn't. I didn't. And that was the first time I just stopped really. I was going to training and I wasn't really having that same excitement. Obviously, it was a great group and there's a good group of players, but I'd sort of lost a bit of that sort of passion, and I felt like, for me, it was probably the best decision for me and the club to sort of come away from that and let them sort of go the direction they were, and hopefully for me get something else sorted that I could go in and feel like I was going to be sort of a part of it.
No, definitely. Just a little touch on one thing. You did have a spell, 3 games, international career, England C team, scoring one. And I remember coming to watch one of them at the Kassam, actually. And I remember there's some good little players on the pitch at that. I mean, there's a huge centre-back England had. I can't remember his name now. But we had one. But what was that like?
Exodus, big guy.
Yeah.
Exodus seems he'd played a few clubs in non-league. But for me, again, one of the proudest moments. I think no matter what level of C, D, E, whatever level of England, like, it made no difference to me. Pulling on that white shirt and obviously the 3 Lions, it was just. I played for like England colleges when I was at college, and that was equally as special. Like, again, everybody wanted to play England schoolboys. That was the sort of pinnacle. I got rejected from that. I didn't get through the trials for that, and I remember being at college and then getting sort of the offer, the trials of the England college, and I was just like, well, it don't matter. It's not England schools. I'm still representing my country.
Yeah, exactly.
A massively proud moment for England. See, like, again, we had such a great group of players, and we went off to, I think, Finland for our first game that we won, and then we played obviously in Italy. Managed to score that game, and again, just playing against these. Again, we didn't necessarily know they were that age, but just to be in Italy playing against sort of Italian teams and sort of that culture and sort of flares going off. It was just a massive eye opener, but to represent your country was a special time. And then, like I say, to play in the final at Oxford was just the icing on the cake. I know we lost the game in the end, but against Belgium, but to play at the Kassam and sort of represent your country, sort of 2 of my sort of loves coming together at the same place was a special day.
I agree, mate. At any level you get to is an achievement, especially I think how many thousands of players were in non-league who didn't get the opportunity, and I think that's a great achievement. So we've just got a few last little bits here for you. So this is where, these are just some little quotes I found. So your style of play. So someone's said a big powerful frontman with bags of pace. Another one, prolific goal scorer. These are just a few I found. Hot shot, goal machine, young hungry player with bags of potential. His striking a partnership with Oxford, with Matty Green and Jamie Cook, was described as devastating in 2009. When you read these things and reflect back, is it quite humbling, like seeing all these moments? Yeah,
definitely. Bags of pace. I don't know where that must have been me quoted that, but I've never been blessed with pace. But
see, I remember you as a striker, and I remember you were quick, but you were strong. You were a strong centre forward, and I think that you could have someone quick with you, but if you're strong enough to hold someone on the ball, and you stride, you'd have Yemi going like this, and then your legs were kind of doing this with him. So I can tell you, there's like, but no, I remember you were a big centre forward. You'd always be on that last man. And you had that turning pace, but you did have an eye for goal. You were kind of like a Kevin Phillips in the sense of right place at the right time, I always found. Especially when I used to watch Oxford. You'd always be where a defender wasn't, but you'd be in that 6-yard box or some danger area, and you'd get that yard of pace. So I think that's where a lot of them come from. But yeah, like I said, it must be something where you look at it and think...
It is nice. Like I say, you look back now, and if I'd started my career now, like I don't know if there'd be that position for me. Sort of that number 9 is being phased out. Everyone wants to be a number 10. Everyone wants to be sort of in the hole. Everyone wants to be sort of that those sort of old fashioned Alan Shearers and Lineker. They're sort of being phased out now. Everyone's wanting someone that can sort of play on the ball. Around the box. You look at Liverpool, they've got 3 of the best probably in the world.
They've got almost like a wingers and what I describe as like an attacking midfielder as their main striker, haven't they? It's like there's not a 4-4-2, 2 up top, sit in the middle, you two. It is very much your attackers. You just
interchanging. Yeah. You look at Origi and like arguably like his record goals to games is phenomenal, but almost he's sort of almost in that mould of that number 9 and. He's just being left out because it's not something they sort of play and you look at a lot of the teams like Tottenham and other teams, obviously Kane's a little bit like that, but a lot of the teams don't have that out and out striker. Man City don't have that big man Dzeko that they used to have or anyone like that. So I think I feel lucky in a way I played when I did that I've given that opportunity to be that person because like I say now I think I'd be sort of shuffled around and made to play different positions just because no one really wanted that target man. No one really wants that sort of out and out striker now.
Yeah, I know exactly what like you said, you described them strikers that you see. Everyone nowadays, the game's just about pace. You find, and if you kind of go, I look at teams. I think they go with the approach of they'd rather a player which is quick and will get the ball, will get there like 9 times out of 10, but the delivery might only be 2 out of 10, rather than a player who potentially only get there twice out of 10, but will deliver the same, and it's very tricky, but I think your goal ratio is what you built your career on, really, and I think that speaks for itself. And when I speak to other teams and what they look for, a lot of teams tend to say say if you bagged 20 goals a season from headers, and you got a player, say a quick striker who bags 20 goals a season from being nippy and legging it up there, they look at kind of, well, we've got the big man, little man situation, what fits it perfectly, and I think there's always room for a player like yourself in a squad, regardless. It's like Dzeko or an Origi. There's always going to be a place for a goal scorer. But no, the game definitely has changed, big time. But there was some stats I looked at, and so you had 9 teams that we've gone through, 16 years it's covered, and in that time you had 689 appearances, 236 goals. It works out every 2.9 games you'd bang a goal. But the last few questions, these are literally quick firing ones, not to keep you too much longer. What team do you support?
Tottenham.
Best stadium you've played at?
Wembley.
Best player you've played with?
It's a difficult one. I think obviously I haven't played with sort of Merson and players like that, but it was more, he was a manager. I think when I first went there, I played with Matty Fryer, and as a striker, sort of like to look at him, he was nothing special. Like he just looked a bit like he'd come in with his backpack on, and he didn't look like anything. But then you get him on the pitch, and I've never seen anyone finish like how he finished it. He was just unbelievable.
Proudest career moment?
Walking out with the team at Wembley, and also then obviously collecting the trophy at the end as well.
With
With Oxford.
With Oxford. Lowest career moment?
Lowest career moment? Probably, again, with Kidderminster, having been sort of 2-0 up and then losing it sort of in the 89th, 90th minute and like that final whistle going and just like sort of collapsing to my knees and like say I shed a few tears that day. I think just we were in such a good position and considered what could happen to not happen. Like I say, that's probably the toughest point.
Best career goal?
Best career goal? I scored a couple. I scored one against Histon away, left foot, top greenie, done brilliant for me, knocked it down and left foot, top corner, probably the best left foot goal I scored. But I enjoyed Torquay away, volley, Clarkey, long ball over the top, bounced, I think, and I just instinct just hit it, and I think it got goal of the season that season. But
yeah, you did.
For me, those type of goals where you ain't got too much time to think, just hit it.
Yeah, instinctively.
Looped over the goalie, but yeah, that's probably one of my favourites.
Favourite trophy that you possess?
Conference playoff trophy. I think, like I say, some people say it's not really a trophy, but for me, to win that game, obviously it was a what is sort of like almost like a mini final. It's not obviously winning the league outright, but it's still a trophy to sort of look back on and realise what that meant at the time and what it meant for the club is a proud moment.
Definitely. And what does the future hold for yourself? What are you going to look at doing next?
Just starting my B licence, which is strange. It's all on Zoom and it's all sort of over sort of computer, which is going to be strange. Obviously, I've done my level 1 and 2, and it's completely different. And I've just recently done my FA Talent ID. Yeah, I've done that one. Courses. So again, something really interesting. Another side, another feather to the bow of staying in sport, which is what I'd love to do. And I still don't know 100% if it's going to be coaching or scouting or sort of behind the scenes or anything really. I'm just sort of trying to see what's out there. I think as a player, all I've ever done is play, and you get to sort of 35 and not with a huge amount of qualifications, and you're sort of limited really in terms of what you can do. So just trying to use the time as best I can and get as many qualifications as I can to try and help that transition from playing into sort of the next phase. I'd love to hopefully play for a few more years, and then go into sort of start progressing it into coaching and see where that takes me.
I appreciate today. It's been good chatting to you. It'd be good to catch up again, maybe in a few months, see how everything's going with you at the end of this pandemic, what we're going through. But no, I really do appreciate the time you've taken out today. And if there's anyone else you can think of, that'd be good to get on and have a chat with, send them my way or send me some names. Get more on the show and even get yourself back on with someone else maybe and have a chat about some other bits in football. And especially if you're doing your coaching, it'd be great to go through how you found the courses and what you've experienced or what you're going into at the back of it.
Yeah, perfect.